something is not right here and something needs to be fixed. I don't ever claim to have all the answers, but I will create an environment in City Hall where differing ideas will be welcomed and we can come to good solutions to the problems that we created.
Hello, friends. Have you got your coffee? Are you ready for Talking Racine? George Myers is.
I'm ready to talk to you.
Jim, I bet you're ready too.
I am.
Jim Spodek. I'm the only guy that's unprepared.
We'll carry him, George. We'll carry him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to read something to you here right off the top. It's from the Azarian wrecking lawsuit. This is by Judge John Fredrickson, who we've become an admirer
Very
of.
good judge.
Yes.
Thank you, Judge. Thank
And
you,
this
Judge
this has
Fredrickson.
to do with Machinery Row. So, it's very brief, and just keep in mind it's about Machinery Row and all of the malfeasance that went on there, and this is the judge's writing about it. Finally, defendants take issue with those portions of the pleadings that cast FDP, Financial District Properties, if you remember, Rodney Blackwell, as a straw man. FDP might more aptly be referred to as a shell company. But straw man is not overly pejorative under the facts as pleaded in this case. Plaintiffs allege that FDP had no skin in the game, no personal guarantees, no invested money, no autonomy from the city's property acquisition wishes, and that FDP acted as a hand of the city.
Is that all?
Well, yeah, but keep in mind, this is allegations that the plaintiffs are making. That's what
Yeah, but this is a judge in the judge's writing, though.
Yeah, absolutely. They allege FDP's acquisitions of the Azarian properties were funded entirely from loaned city money, which we know to be true. That FDP's interest payments to the city were paid with Azarian and other Machinery Row property sellers' environmental holdback monies. We know that's true. That when other people's money ran out, FDP defaulted on its city loan. And that when FDP defaulted, the city automatically acquired the Azarian properties at less than fair market value because deeds in lieu of foreclosure were in place from day one. This judge gets it. This is a great summation of what the plaintiffs are alleging, but we know it's all true, and I'm thinking the judge probably realizes as well, or he wouldn't allow this case to go forward. He'd just say, "Oh, no," because the city, if you remember, moved to have this dismissed.
Right.
The judge says, "No, we're going to go to trial."
What I wanted to do was dissect that paragraph, to bring that in and bring the documentation to that paragraph.
Let me ask you, Jim, what's a shell corporation?
Well, there we go. Doc, you want to read that one?
A shell corporation is a corporation without active business operations or significant assets. These types of corporations are not all necessarily illegal, but they are sometimes used illegitimately, such as to disguise business ownership from law enforcement or the public.
And how did that work with Machinery Row?
That worked out beautifully.
Oh yeah, they disguised it for a while.
For 3-4 years. Yeah. But what was always alleged and what we brought up on this show was that he was a straw man, which I mean was truthful and descriptive.
Now, what's a straw man?
Straw man is a person that comes in and is used by someone else to, in this case, purchase property. To come in and the real buyer of the property.
He's a pretend thing.
If the real buyer of the property has reasons that they do not want to be identified, they'll use a straw man, a front man,
Right.
And in this case, the city did not want to be recognized as the acquirer of the properties, and we're saying and alleging, and have for a long time, you're the first guy I think that ever noticed this, that what they were doing is the city did not want to be recognized as a buyer because they would owe relocation fees, they would have to pay fair market value, etc., etc. It would have been more costly for the transaction to take place between the city and the property owners than between a straw man and the property owners. But they failed to realize that they might get caught doing that, and now it's going to end up costing a whole lot more money than if they just would have gone in straightforward, told the sellers, the property owners what they wanted.
Been honest. Come out and buy the property outright.
Yeah.
And pay the relocation fees like they were supposed to do, like they've done many, many times before.
Absolutely.
Like they gave PowerPoint presentations on how it's done, how it's done right.
Right.
Scott Letney was like a lecturer on how to use
How to do
and
things
to do-
right. Yep,
yeah.
absolutely. On how to relocate property.
Yeah.
So he
knew-
wanted to be slick.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I want to do a slight video here because I want to bring in, when we talk about shell companies, we're talking about the early days when $4.5 million was allocated out of the intergovernmental fund to purchase this property. And the Common Council had to vote on it to release those funds. And one of the speakers was Corey Mason, who came up there and asked that, the Common Council release this money. But what was interesting about this at the time was Corey Mason knew that this was a shell company that was actually buying Machinery Row. And he knew that this was something he did not know.
He knew Rodney Blackwell and he knew FDP.
Yes.
And
So what he's doing is deceiving the Common Council in requesting them to release $4.5 million to purchase this property.
Now, let me see that clip.
All right.
Good evening, Mayor, Alderman of the City of Racine. I'm thrilled to be here today. I think what you're going to do tonight will hopefully be part of something historic for the City of Racine. It would be the city's largest redevelopment project, perhaps in its history, and certainly the biggest one we've seen in a long time. So I'd like to first start by congratulating the mayor and the administration for the work that they've done to get us to this point in working with the developer and really working with people at a multi-jurisdictional level to get this done. This is a really unique and historic partnership. When I think about the funds that you're looking at spending here today, before I was elected to the legislature, I had the opportunity to serve on the Redevelopment Authority, and those funds are often used for some good projects, things like strip malls or redevelopment of a single property or something that might make a modest improvement on one property or on one corner. And those are all for the good. But I think when people think about the funds that you're considering before you, it was with the ambition that we could invest in things in the city that would be game changers for the future of the city, that we could do things that were big and bold and change the redevelopment direction of the city. And that's what you have in front of you, members of the council, an opportunity to do something big and bold that would literally change the way people think about downtown and the river, and I'd even argue the city itself. So I can't think of a more appropriate use of the funds than a big project like this. And I would even challenge you, if it's not for a big and bold project like this, what would you fund it for? I mean, it's really a great opportunity you have in front of you. The other thing I'd like to remind people of is nobody's asking the city to go this alone. The state literally changed the law, in no small part because of this project, to bring historic tax credits to Racine, some other communities as well, but Racine specifically. And there's the potential of losing $9 million worth of credits if action isn't taken before the end of the year. I would hate to see that as a possible outcome of today. So nobody's asking the city to bear the brunt of it alone. You've had a bipartisan coalition of legislators work together to get this stuff done. The last thing I'll say about the developer and what I know about FDP and Rodney Blackwell, I've had the opportunity to go to Quad Cities and see the Kone project and see apartment buildings that he's renovated where it's market rate apartments and young professionals are moving into downtowns and getting things done. We are lucky to have a developer like this here who wants to build market rate work, who builds things, project labor agreements, and knows how important it is to have local hiring and to have the people hired reflect the community that they're working in, and they want to build it green. So I've seen the work that they've done there, and I'm excited for them to come here and do this. So I'm thrilled to be in front of you today, and I would urge you to adopt what you've got in front of you for an historic opportunity for the city. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that definitely was unique and historical.
Now, he knew Rodney Blackwell, right?
Yes.
As he said in there. And you're saying that as he's speaking that, the deed in lieu and foreclosure is already signed.
Yes. So they've already, Rodney came in with, at this point, he had no money. He had no access to money. Rodney, at this point, was a straw man or a shell company, however you want to put it. At that point, they had a deed in lieu of foreclosure. So Rodney had already not even purchased the property. But if you notice, it was hurry up, let's get it signed. You know, we need this now because the tax credits are hanging out there. You're not going this alone. You're going with the state of Wisconsin. The fact is that he had signed a deed in lieu of foreclosure, which Fredrickson brings into this decision and talks about it, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But he brings in that deed in lieu of foreclosure, which means that Rodney had signed the deed back to the city that he hasn't even purchased yet. So what there was is protection to the city, or if you want to go this far, the purchasing of the city was purchasing the property. If you get into legalese a little bit, you can't have a deed, you can't have a mortgage and a deed. You're the owner of the property. If you own the mortgage and the deed, George, who owns the property? You do.
Yeah, the person
So
with
the
it.
city has a mortgage and the deed. They own the property. So Rodney was just a
Figurehead.
as he puts it,
Well, he was a straw
acting-
man. He's
acting
kind of
as the hand of the city.
What is? It looks like is the objective for the city to own that property? I mean, you're talking from the beginning. The city wanted the property.
Corey said in his little speech there that he was on the redevelopment authority. He actually headed the RDA for a period of time.
Okay.
They remember it went back to the route was the first plan. They had all of that corridor already sectioned out. And then it went to Route Works, and that was also associated with Corey Mason for Madison at the time. They brought in a development firm, Vanderwall, I believe. Now, Vanderwall also donated to his campaign at a fairly large amount of money. So this thing it all fits together. But at the time, that Common Council did not know that Rodney Blackwell did not have cash, did not have access to cash, and really, Rodney never showed up at closing.
Well, you're talking, Jim. You're talking about a very complicated set of circumstances here. You have Corey Mason in Madison.
Correct.
You have John Dickert in Racine, and John Dickert apparently wants to get that property. So he's coordinating with Corey Mason in Madison, who's coordinating with the governor to get the tax credits.
No.
And it's all fake.
I don't believe
Well, I
the
think
tax
he worked
credits
with the legislature. Was he working directly with Walker? Or?
Well, no, but he worked with the legislator and Voss and the rest to get those tax credits. Now, the tax credits probably were, but I don't believe they knew that Blackwell was not. I mean, Blackwell had done some projects. There's no doubt about that.
Did Corey Mason know at the time, though, that Blackwell was just a shell company?
Yes.
And he was coordinated with Dickert, and at that point he knew that there was it was all fake.
Yes. So
That's some pretty heavy allegations there, young man.
Well,
It's right there, huh? All right,
looking,
we're
we
having-
got a judge
that's what
who
we're
thinks
looking
the
at.
same thing.
Well, that that's amazing. It's almost, to me, the problem I have with it, I don't see them as being that smart. And then being that able to
You know what it is?
collude that
Yeah.
secretly over such a long period of time.
Well,
I see
agree
them
with
as
you, but you know
bungling
what? We're
idiots.
talking-
I'm sorry.
Well, they did mess it up, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. If they were really slick, they might have pulled it off, but they didn't.
No, because that's an amazing story. You see that? Why he's giving that presentation, and you heard what he's saying there. That all that time he knew that FDP, Blackwell, was just a fake. He was just a shell company,
He was a straw man.
or a
It's
straw
a
man,
shell-
if you want to
yeah,
call it.
shell
We're coming
company
down
doesn't
here.
really fit
We're going to
the
get money out of you because John Dickert wants that property. I mean, it's there. It's got 11 companies going. You know, it's a relatively productive thing. Not as productive as when it was working for
employees,
part
there's
of Case.
taxpayers.
But you had 11 companies going on there with being employed, and somebody wants it so that they can get what they have today,
Correct.
level land.
Well,
And
you
again,
got to give Corey credit because he does say some things that did come to truth.
What was
This
that?
was intended to change the way people think about downtown. And I think he hit the nail right on the head there.
I think you got that one right.
We thought it was almost dead. Now they know it's dead.
Yeah, they drove the last nail into that one.
No offense to people downtown. I know it's not dead yet. You guys will bring it back to. If it's dead, you'll bring it back to life.
If you get
That
people's
downtown corporation,
root off your neck, yeah.
they kick butt. They do well.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. Now, Corey is definitely, John Dickert knew, Corey Mason knew, Tom Friedel knew, and Scott Letney knew. This was really the core group that was in this shell company information. They knew it. They knew it was moving forward. What they were hoping for. And I have to remember, you got political aspirations of great things. Dickert announces Machinery Row, and Corey's there, and all this tax credit is being delivered. And now you got a guy who says, "Hey, can't get the money. Sorry, guys, I'm taking off." Wait! You can't take off. We're going to give you $4.5 million. You act like you buy it, and we'll buy it, and we'll make sure we cover you. And hopefully along the way we find somebody else that'll come in and do this project. Because we don't want to look like a bunch of political do-nothings. We're great people.
We don't want to look like what we are.
Yeah.
and they had to move it forward at that point because they had basically already destroyed all those businesses down there.
Exactly.
They ruined the livelihoods.
Well,
of
let's
people
go there
were-
because they did an extra. They went now. You have to remember they're borrowing this money, so they tell the Common Council, he's going to pay 1% or 2%, whatever it was, on the loan. So we'll get quarterly payments from him on this loan.
Yeah, we're getting money. We know it's legit. Yeah,
we know we're going to
money.
get the payments. So he's going to pay on that, and in a year he'll be able to get the financing, and we're going to move this project forward. And of course, the Journal Times, they were able, oh gosh, look at how great it's going to be, and they couldn't fall over this project. Now you can't find them talking about the project, but in the beginning they couldn't fall over this thing fast enough. And here's
It's a
the
game
other line.
changer.
It's a game changer,
Historical.
right? Okay, now in Fredrickson's paragraph here, they allege FDP's acquisitions of the Azarian properties were funded entirely from loaned city money. That FDP interest payments to the city were paid with Azarian and other Machinery Row property sellers.
And we know that was the case.
It's
Sandy
absolutely-
Widener brought
She brought that
I
up
believe.
originally. She did bring it up originally.
Mr. Blackwell borrowed money from the city of Racine, cut a different deal with the sellers of the property, set up an escrow account for him to draw money out of over the last year and a half. I had no idea that I should even have asked the question of the administration if something like this would have happened. When this came to light, this is where, the city administrator kept saying to us, the council, well, he's paying his interest payments. He paid his interest payments with money that he took from the sellers.
But there's an email, and I'm going to put it on the screen right now. This is what they call the smoking gun. Now, it's Elaine Eakes, who was hired by the city attorney's office to do the closing for the Machinery Row project. And this particular closing was Olson's property. It was 900 Water Street. It was right in the middle of the Machinery Row development. And in that closing, now we're talking December 30th, day before the actual closing, there's an email that comes, and I'm going to put it on the screen, asking, now this is Blackwell's attorney. This is the attorney that's supposedly doing the closing for Blackwell. Now Blackwell didn't come to closing, no need to. Asking if Elaine is comfortable reducing the purchase price from 1.5 to 1.35 to fund the reserve. That reserve is the interest payments that Mason, Dickert, the attorneys said that Blackwell was making on this property. So they were taking the money, in this particular case, taking $150,000 from Olson on his properties. They took another $110,000 or $120,000 from Sam Azarian. They took $190,000 from Gita Jensen, who owned another building down there, to fund this reserve. They called it environmental something. There was no environmental work done on it. It was all bogus. What it was a slush fund to pay the interest payments and to make it look like there was development going on.
The total was $500,000.
$450,000.
Right. And what when I first saw this, well, you showed me this email before. What he's saying there is, it seems to me he's saying is that this is such a strange action we're taking. Rodney's saying okay, or his lawyer is saying okay, but is Elaine Eakes, the city's attorney, good with that? Because otherwise it could be just come out as total fraud.
George, you know why? It's taxpayers' money. And they made the allegation to the Common Council and to the RDA that this is the amount of money we're paying for these properties, or borrowing Blackwell to pay for these properties. They didn't say there was a kickback involved. They didn't say that we're taking money from the sellers and we're going to make the interest payments on this also. That was never brought up to them. They were fraudulently led along the Common Council. Not that that's difficult, but the fact is they were fraudulently brought along the way, and of course they couldn't fall over each other to sign up and say, gee whiz, this is going to be a great development and all the rest.
Well, they were led to believe that the purchase price was $4.5 million.
Right, but there weren't a lot of questions asked. Who asked questions?
Sandy Widener.
And does Sandy have, do they have an issue with Sandy with those questions? Hell yeah, they do.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get to that too. But let's go one more step on this paragraph.
Just in summary on that email, though, from Rodney Blackswell's viewpoint, this was a really, really strange type of proposition that he's willing to take advantage of, but he doesn't want to get hit with committing fraud, even though he knows. I don't know if he understands how he's being used, but at any rate, so he wants to make sure that the opposing attorney is okay with it, because if that is okay with it, then I at least won't get hung with it.
Right. It's on your back.
That's right.
It's on the city's back.
That's
but they had no problem with it. They took that money, put it into a title company that made payments to the city, and we're collecting our payments. I remember Friedel in one of the.
But he was asked directly, "Is he keeping up with the payments?" And Friedel said yes.
Absolutely. Every month.
And it was always, well, we don't have that paperwork with us tonight.
Right.
But yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's always missing paperwork when you ask those guys pointed questions.
And the thing along the way. Was this deed in lieu of foreclosure. So there's your real hook. The deed in lieu of foreclosure. Oh, we don't have it. We don't know anything about it. There was no discussion on the deed in lieu of foreclosure. The Common Council knew nothing of that. Blackwell had signed over that deed to the city on all the properties. So Blackwell supposedly had a mortgage. He signed a mortgage, but he had no, and it says in Fredrickson's paragraph, he had no exposure.
No
investment monies, no autonomy, the city's property, no personal guarantees, no investment monies. I mean, he had nothing in it. So, and he walked away with some cash. Now, to nail down exactly what it was around $125,000, give or take how it went and how it got distributed. But the fact is, he walked out. The city now ran this whole property. And then, of course, if you go far enough, you go into the relocation part of it, which we don't want to get in tonight. But the fact is, the deed in lieu of foreclosure. That's really the key to the whole fraud. Because if he wasn't a straw man, or if it wasn't a shell company, he would not sign a deed. Why would I? If I'm buying your property, George, why would I give a deed to you? I'm going to get a mortgage from you, George. Give me $100,000. You're the bank. I'm going to buy Doc's property, and I need you to give me $100,000. I'm going to buy Doc's property. I'm going to get the deed, but I have a mortgage on it with you. Well, now in this case, the mortgage company gets the deed. The mortgage company gets the money and the property also. So they own everything. So what am I?
Well, a deed in lieu of foreclosure is a legal instrument if the person fails to make his payments on a mortgage, and then he signs a deed in lieu of foreclosure.
It's at
the time of default.
Right.
This was done on day one.
Right, day one.
You think they were anticipating default?
They already knew default was there.
Oh yeah, it was baked into the pie.
Right. So this default was day one. So
it's amazing that someone could stand up there in front of the council and talk like that in glowing terms about this developer and about this whole program and how it's going to change the face of Racine and how everybody's going to look at Racine differently now in face of all the skullduggery and fraud that's going on. It's amazing that someone can stand up there and talk like that.
We're going to go into the deed in lieu of foreclosure because at some point that has to come up. Because now, when Sandy Widener in September of 2016 calls it out and says, hey, wait a second here, where's the money? What's going on here? And now they realize that Sandy's onto them, that knows that there's an issue here, but of course they got to shut Sandy down. But as time goes on, Dickert leaves. Now that's a whole other story, and we're going to get into that at some other later date. But now, Nicole Larson comes to the committee of the whole, which is part of the Common Council, or all of Common Council, to discuss the deed in lieu of foreclosure. And I'm going to play.
And you have that on tape.
I do.
Let's watch that.
Administration had negotiated with the owner of the parcels was this concept called a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And that's, sorry, a little bit louder. I'll pull this a little bit closer. Sorry about that. I have a bit of a cold, and so my head's a little stuffy too, so forgive me. The deed in lieu of foreclosure, and as part of the security interest, as you are well aware, the city has a mortgage interest in the property. It required the developer to execute these deeds, effectively quitclaim deeds. And what that said, what the deed in lieu of foreclosure is that rather than foreclosing on the mortgage, the developer agreed that the city could just take title to the property without having to go through that foreclosure process. And if I could just I'll just keep going. And so at the time that I think the second development agreement was executed, new quitclaim deeds were executed by FDP's member, Rodney Blackwell, and those are currently being held. Now, the quitclaim deeds, I mean, they're just a piece of paper sitting in a file. They're not recorded with the Register of Deeds. They don't give the city at this point in time any greater ownership interest than anybody off the street, than any of us individually in this room have here today.
Just a piece of paper. Nothing to worry about here.
Nothing to see.
Nothing to see.
We're just going to file it when we feel like, the prime time will come.
Well, you've been involved in real estate, and so have you. Is a deed in lieu of foreclosure at the time of purchase, is that an ordinary thing?
No. It's usually fraudulent. As a matter of fact, I don't believe that it'll hold up in a court. It will not hold up in court. I mean, you can't come to the judge and say, listen, I had this signed when we did the deal, and I want to execute my deed in lieu of foreclosure. They'll throw them out of court. It's not legal. It's not a legal document that you can use. What you have here is you don't have a purchaser. You don't have a developer. That's the problem. You got the city doing it to themselves.
Well, that's very interesting that it doesn't hold up in court. And of course, it held up this time because there was nobody objecting.
Nobody objected. If Blackwell
already knew that he was going to take over.
Nothing. But if we can get into all the details, but Blackwell waited till the very end to sign over that deed, or to have it executed, because he had to do a couple things there, and he didn't. He just kind of played the city a little bit. Scare them like, hey, you guys, haven't worked well with me. It was bogus from the beginning. And of course, one of the last things is explaining to the committee of the whole, the Common Council, like how we're going to take the property back. So, I mean, from the beginning, it was to take the property, it was to own the property, and then toward the end there, it was to actually take the property back, which they did. And of course, at that point, then what do? We got to knock down the evidence. We'll go out and knock all these buildings down. And then, of course, the millions of dollars more. But we're talking about taxpayers' money. We're not talking about a bad loan that happened to be made and somebody had some difficulties and they couldn't make the payments and what have you. This is an orchestrated effort to just basically steal that property from those owners. And that's what they did. And that's why Azarian is in court. That's why Patrick Fagan is in court. That's why Sandy Widener is in court with this whole debacle with...
and Rick Olson was, but he settled, right?
At the time of that talk that Corey Mason made to the council, were there people getting evicted out of those buildings?
Yes.
So the evictions had already started.
Yes.
Then. All right.
Sam Azarian was actually evicted at some point. Yeah. So they made the sales.
Because I remember that when they kicked the Kiwanis baseball team out of there.
Right. Right.
And I just don't have that in alignment with when the fake.
Well, that was
when the fake.
You have to remember though, George.
Up.
We're talking about the financing package here. When you go into the relocation, that's a whole other
right.
Part
No,
of it.
yeah, and we're not going to discuss that. But I know people were evicted before the city took obvious ownership because that was to avoid the relocation costs.
Correct.
All right. So at the time that they were making these arrangements to get Rodney Blackwell, and hey, I know this guy in Iowa, he's going to be a great developer. The evictions were already starting to take place.
Well, I don't know if they actually started the evictions at that point, but they were definitely in there making, checking out the lumber, checking out the surveying. I mean, they had looked at this way before. Okay. I mean, they had a whole plan of that area, George.
Right.
They already had it all planned out. They maybe didn't have Machinery Row. the way they had the buildings laid out, but they definitely had the land all laid out, including the walkway along the
promenade.
the promenade and the bicycle path along Mount Avenue. And, this thing goes so deep. When they ran out of money, they went to the DNR and fraudulently took capital from the DNR. This thing is so deep. And here's where I want to go with it all. And I wanted to bring up Sandy Widener and her case in this, too, because when she did it, she was brought up on when her mayoral race in front of the ethics committee and, of course, all this, sealed documents and stuff. Well, it was all tied to Machinery Row, because if they let Sandy Widener win being mayor, what would have happened? You'd have this thing would have exploded.
December 2014, when the council approved loaning $4.5 million to the developer purchaser, with really very little information about what the development would be or the developer's reputation or ability to follow through with what he initially had proposed. The city also bought 2 buildings to the tune of $1.8 million. So there was $6.5 million of money that could have been invested in things that are important to this city for economic development, our neighborhoods, small businesses, our infrastructure. Instead, we bought that property, what's known as Machinery Row, and now if you take a ride by Machinery Row and see the condition that the city is now responsible for, rather than those being privately owned, you, the taxpayers, now own those buildings, and you are responsible for maintaining them, tearing them down, whatever that is needed. The other part of it is that's $6.5 million worth of assessed property value that is no longer on the property tax rolls. So that property tax gets shifted to fewer shoulders, your shoulders. And that's a big concern that I have when the city continues in its quest to own more property. Something is not right here, and something needs to be fixed. I don't ever claim to have all the answers, but I will create an environment in City Hall where differing ideas will be welcomed and we can come to good solutions to the problems that we created.
Yeah, and she wouldn't have been hiding anything.
No, as a matter of fact, in her campaign, she was bringing these facts out.
You're ethically challenged. We can't show you the evidence, but you're ethically challenged. You have a problem. You need to be professionally reviewed.
Right.
We can't give you the evidence we have against you because it is so secretive. It is so important. It's you shouldn't be allowed to.
Here's one of the things. Where is the local media? We've done this. We broke this story. We're the ones that actually brought this out early on, and of course we were looked upon like, "Well, you guys are crazy. You're not talking. You guys don't understand."
You see conspiracy everywhere.
Yeah. Where's the media? When you talk about something like this case, and you're talking about when it's brought in, and that's his word, the shell company. Now, he brought in that word shell company. He says, well, it's more like a shell company, which I agree with him. I think it's more accurate. But where's the Journal Times? They were there in the beginning to pump this thing up at $4.5 million. They were there to pump up another development, and they were there to take the buildings down and then to take all the lumber and all the scrap out of the buildings. All that seemed to be covered. But when it comes down to the other part of it where the taxpayer loses $4.5 million, closer to $15 million when you're looking at this, where is that information? Why is that information isn't put out into the public? Or why aren't they beating this an editorial? Where's an editorial? They're laying right here.
Yeah. Well, now all of that property is not generating tax income either. There's no tax revenue on there. Right. What is it? 20 acres down there. Definitely. 20 acres of prime real estate. No
There's
tax,
a couple $100,000 a year, as I recall, the amount of taxes.
I think it was.
Something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the city was making money. Businesses were going. Jobs were there. Now it's just land.
We can move on to other parts later, but I think this was an important step in the investigation into Machinery Row. This decision.
And we might see some justice yet in this area.
Maybe something will come of it.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody should get some justice here. Patrick Fagan, Sam Azarian, Rick Olson. Somebody
the
should.
Taxpayers would be nice if the taxpayers got justice.
That's really the bottom line. Is the taxpayers have been so stroked, it's unbelievable, and they just keep going.
You know who I would like to see get justice? I would like to see Corey and Scott Letney and John Dickert. I'd like to see them all receive justice because they'd be vacationing in the Crowbar Hotel for a while.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, well, I think that we've probably,
Well, we burned up.
we've exhausted our welcome here in these fine people's kitchens. So we'll call it a day for today, and we'll be back next week, and we hope you come and join us. Thanks for joining us today.